Sequencers. The first thought is always note sequencing, which is exciting in its own right, but there are so many other parameters out there in which sequencers can shine just as much, such as filter cutoff, pulse width, envelope parameters, and much more. They can offer a more unique structure and even random seeming sounds to your patch while providing rhythm through the repetitive nature of sequencers. A really great example of a simple yet powerful sequencer is Cellz by Cre8audio. Although it's mainly proposed as a 1 volt per octave sequencer, where I feel Cellz really shines is as an unquantized CV sequencer. To enter into this magical mode, simply press both tune buttons. Now both sequencer channels are unquantized for the full 0 to 5 volt range. In this video, I'll show sequencer patch ideas that are sure to work with any sequencer, along with a few tricks that make Cellz a really great and unique CV sequencer. You can jump to any section of the video using the time codes now. And let's start out with something simple, filter cutoff. For this demonstration, I have a typical Moog style patch patched up with my oscillator into a filter into a VCA, and the oscillator is being sequenced by Pamela's new workout, quantized to the minor scale. Cellz is going to be sequencing the frequency cutoff of the filter. The gate out is triggering the envelope for our VCA, and I have two trigger inputs coming from Pamela's new workout to trigger Cellz. And the CV out here is going into our oscilloscope here first, so we could see what's going on. And then it is going into our filter cutoff. For the sequence, I just have it rising in value for each step to best show the sequence and then how it can vary with Cellz to show how it's different than using a synced LFO or a slow envelope or even a module like Club Diaz or something like that. I'll show why Cellz works better with certain things. So first, here's our pattern. And you can see I'm just giving us a 16-step pattern with our filter cutoff. But we could change one trigger value. I'm just going to change this one to be on every quarter note instead of every whole beat. And we'll see how this changes up our sequence. So it's rising within its own right on each repeat there, but then it's also rising relative across the whole sequence. And then we could really shake things up and give things a sample and hold random type feel by adding Euclidean patterns to both triggers here, instead of more regular trigger patterns like we were using before. When you're thinking about the triggers going out here, this is the sum of two different Euclidean trigger patterns here. So if you think about using logic with PAMs, it's kind of doing the OR function with our triggers. And then we could vary this up even more by taking our second CV channel, since we have that, and going into, say, pulse width. And that is filter cutoff. We could also use this to adjust the fold amount on a wavefolder. Or to modulate the release time of an envelope. Or we could dive deeper into sequencing time-based effects like delays and reverbs. Right now I have the reverb mix amount being modulated. and dive even deeper by sequencing something like the density of beads or clouds. Another great use of a sequencer is to sequence the chords of a polyphonic oscillator. Right now, I'm using qubit chord, and I have the same volt per octave sequence coming from PAMs as we have heard before. Cellz is going to be sequencing both the quality, i.e., major, minor, dominant, diminished chords, and the voicing, or rather the chord positioning. So it's going to be sequencing both from both channels of Cellz. So we can hear, even though right now we have the same volt per octave note, we're getting different chords in here. So when we play it in our sequence of notes, we get nice controlled chords. And again, since this is Cellz, we can really play with the sequence and have more fun with it. And that is sequencing polyphonic oscillator with Cellz. Another great thing to sequence that goes in hand with your volt per octave sequencing is sequence offsetting, which is what Cellz is really great at as well. So here I have a sequence in Bloom right now. Let's hear that. So right now I have the CV from Cellz going into the root note of Bloom, meaning that when I change my root note, the sequence is going to be offset. So play the sequence, and then I have it offset a little bit on the second step. Now, using Cellz with this is a great way to advance a song because you could just manually change a root note there for progression in our chords in our song. But we can also sequence this up with a clock to give us more interesting and more rigid response. So we're basically enhancing and expanding our initial sequence to be more steps than it was before. And that is using Cellz as a sequencer offset. In another area where Cellz is really great, as I mentioned before, playing it by hand in different parts of the song, you could also use it, say, between two songs if you're performing live, where you have presets and you can even space them out so they're really far away. You have two preset CV values up here, and you have two preset CV values down here, and you can manually change between them in between songs or whatever, and you have up to 16 presets for two outputs. And that is all for this video on sequencing with Cellz by Cre8audio.